Now, it's vital that the amount of water in the body is finely controlled to keep it within homeostatic levels, within normal physiological homeostatic ranges. Not too much, not too little. If there's too much water, this will cause fluid overload and will lead to heart failure. If there's not enough water, this will lead to dehydration, ultimately to hypovolemia, which is low volumes of blood, and eventually that will cause shock and death. So it needs to be maintained within a homeostatic range. So how is this done? Well, if the amount of water in the body is reduced, that's going to increase the concentration of the blood. It's going to make the blood more osmotic. But if there's more water in the blood, because there's more water in the body, that's going to make the blood more dilute, and that will reduce the osmotic pressure of the blood. So the osmotic pressure of the blood is going to vary depending on the amount of water in the blood at any one time. More water is going to decrease osmolarity, less water is going to increase osmolarity. And there are osmoreceptors that can detect the osmotic potential of the blood at any one time. And these osmoreceptors are located in the hypothalamus in the brain. So the hypothalamus is constantly monitoring how much water is in the blood by looking at how osmotic or otherwise the blood is. This is done by specialist cells in the hypothalamus called osmoreceptors. But then, of course, it's necessary that these detector cells do something with this information. There has to be an effector system working on the detector system. So what happens is these osmoreceptor cells control the amount of antidiuretic hormone that is released from the posterior pituitary gland. Now, you might remember that the pituitary gland is in two lobes, the anterior lobe at the front and the posterior lobe at the back. The anterior lobe mostly secretes the trophic hormones, which control other endocrine glands, and the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland only secretes two endocrine hormones, oxytocin and the antidiuretic hormone. Now, these hormones that are released by the posterior pituitary gland are actually produced in the hypothalamus itself. There's large cell bodies in the hypothalamus, and these are part of what are called neurosecretory neurons. So the antidiuretic hormone is actually made in the cell bodies in the hypothalamus, migrates down the axons of the neurosecretory neurons, and is actually released from the posterior pituitary gland. So the osmoreceptors in the hypothalamus are communicating with the neurosecretory neurons, controlling the amount of antidiuretic hormone which is released, or the amount of antidiuretic hormone which is not released. Now, a diuretic is a substance which will increase urine volumes. A diuretic will bring about a diuresis. Now, a diuresis is an increase in the amount of urine. So a diuresis actually describes a pathological situation where there is excessive production of urine volumes. And if we were to give you 40 milligrams of furosemide, you would experience that for yourself. You would produce very large volumes of urine. Diuretic drugs greatly increase urine production. They have a diuresis effect. They are diuretics. So an antidiuretic is going to do exactly the opposite. If a diuretic increases urine volumes, an antidiuretic is going to decrease urine volumes. And that's exactly what antidiuretic hormone does. The antidiuretic hormone circulates in the blood and it lowers urine volumes. It means that the kidney secretes less urine. And that means that the urine which is secreted will be more concentrated because of this antidiuretic effect. Because even although the body wants to excrete less water, it wants to conserve water, it still needs to get rid of its waste products. That's still an essential physiological function. So the antidiuretic hormone will lower urine volumes, but that urine will be more concentrated. And this is an important clinical observation. Concentrated urine is going to be dark coloured. Unconcentrated urine, that is more dilute urine, will be light coloured. And when you study the physiology of the kidney, you come across something called obligatory urine output. There's an obligatory minimum volume of urine which is required to get rid of all the waste products that we need to get rid of after a normal 24 hours metabolism. In other words, there is a limit to the ability of the kidney to concentrate urine. They can only get rid of waste products with a certain amount of concentrated urine. They can't concentrate urine indefinitely. They can only concentrate it so much. That means there's a minimum amount of water needs to be excreted in any given period of time to get rid of all the waste products of metabolism. If a lower volume of water is excreted in the urine, lower than the obligatory urine volume, that means all of the waste products will not be excreted and they will start to accumulate in the blood, possibly causing them to rise to toxic levels. And we see this, for example, if a patient develops acute renal failure. So, if the blood becomes more osmotic, that means there's less water in the blood. That's going to be detected in the hypothalamus. And if there's less water in the blood, we need to conserve water in the blood. That means more antidiuretic hormone is produced. That will have a greater antidiuretic effect. That will reduce urine volumes and will conserve water in the blood. And at the same time, if that situation happens, if there's less water in the blood, that will stimulate thirst cells in the hypothalamus. The person will become very thirsty and will seek water to drink, to dilute the blood again, to get more water into the body, to increase the amount of water in the blood. But it will increase the production of antidiuretic hormone, increasing antidiuretic effect, thereby reducing urine volumes. Conversely, if the amount of water in the blood goes up, because we're drinking a lot, it then becomes necessary to get rid of more water to produce larger urine volumes. So in that situation, less antidiuretic hormone will be produced. If there's less antidiuretic hormone, there is less antidiuretic effect. And if you take away the antidiuretic hormone altogether, the kidneys will excrete about 20 litres of urine a day just by themselves. That's what they'll do. So the kidneys, in a sense, like to excrete 20 litres of urine a day, a colossal amount of urine. But it's the antidiuretic effect of the antidiuretic hormone which reduces that. So this means when the blood is too dilute, when there's too much water in the blood, less antidiuretic hormone will be secreted from the posterior lobe. Less antidiuretic effect means more diuresis. The kidneys will increase the amount of water that they excrete in the urine. And this is how the amount of water in the blood is homeostatically regulated. Now, what actually happens is the antidiuretic hormone is working on the nephrons in the kidney. The nephrons are the microscopic functional units of the kidney. An antidiuretic hormone will actually increase the reabsorption of glomerular filtrate from the renal nephrons. So if there's more antidiuretic hormone, there's going to be more reabsorption of filtrate from the nephrons back into the blood. That means more water goes back into the blood. And because more water has been reabsorbed from the nephrons, that means there's going to be less water left in the nephrons. That means that less water is going to go into the collecting duct, so urine volumes will be lower. They will be less. Conversely, if the blood is too dilute and there is less antidiuretic hormone, then there will be less antidiuretic hormone facilitating reabsorption of water from the glomerular filtrate in the nephrons back into the blood. This will mean that more water is left in the nephrons. There will be less reabsorption. If there's less reabsorption, less water goes back into the blood, more water is retained in the nephrons. That goes all the way through the nephrons to the collecting ducts, meaning that there's more water in the collecting ducts. That goes down into the pelvis of the kidney where it's urine. The urine will be more dilute because less has been reabsorbed, because there's less antidiuretic hormone to facilitate that reabsorption from the glomerular filtrate in the nephrons back into the blood. So that is how the levels of water in the body are physiologically regulated, regulated.